Thank you, folks, for joining. Thanks, Stephen, for joining us as well. This is more your show. We have Newland's 5-step action plan for CFOs to get their SaaS spend under control. Before we get started, I can give you a quick introduction about me. I'm Sid. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Spendflo. Prior to starting Spendflo, I used to lead business operations teams at high growth companies, and the company before this is when the idea of Spendflo really came about, where my CFO and I never got along because I spent too much money on SaaS. And she didn't know Steven, so she didn't have this 5-step action plan. And neither did I, for that matter. So that's when we said, hey, let's go start a company to go figure this out. And that's when the idea of Spendflo really came about. But just a quick introduction about what we do at Spendflo. We help companies buy, manage, and secure all of their SaaS tools with guaranteed savings. So if you don't save your money at the end of the year, we'll actually give you a money back guarantee. And it's not just a platform. We actually have a team of expert buyers who can actually help you get the best price for all of your SaaS tools. But Stephen, I'll let you go with your introduction.
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. It's good to meet you. I'm Stephen Newland, and my background has been in early stage startups, from helping a company raise a seed round up to kind of leading a finance team after a Series A round. And now I do FP&A work over at GrowthLab, which does a lot of different FP&A consulting for companies, a lot of startups. So I have experienced this pain point firsthand. I know exactly what you're going through. If you're struggling to manage SaaS spend, or you kind of all of a sudden look and see, why is my software line item way more than it used to be even 6 months ago? So I hope to give you some tips today, at least that I've used and that I've seen be very, very helpful for me. So
Awesome.
Looking forward to it.
Awesome. Just a quick introduction about what's going on in the market right now, right? So there's over $330 billion of SaaS that's going to be bought and renewed this year. And along with that, we actually had a chance to speak to a bunch of different SaaS buyers, procurement leaders, finance leaders across the industry. And we created our State of SaaS Buying report in 2023. And this year is a very unique year, right? We're going through multiple macroeconomic conditions, funding slowing down, all of that. So we wanted to get a bird's eye picture on what this looks like. One of the first things that we noticed was a good portion of folks actually have SaaS spends over $1 million. And that's something that's become fairly common nowadays as well. The second insight we had was the biggest challenges that folks see in the buying process is that it's reactive buying, right? Like somebody is coming to you and saying, hey, I want this yesterday. Can we go live with it yesterday? Or my auto renewal just kicked in and my renewal just got done by itself. That's what we term reactive buying. And the second is obviously folks just don't have any idea on what to pay for your SaaS tools as well, right? And that's the opaque SaaS pricing piece. And along with that, one of the biggest, what are the negotiation levers that people using? It's great, like, you use competition, you use long-term agreements, timing. Like 10% of folks actually just don't use negotiation levers, right? And that's because, like, in all honesty, the folks that we're speaking to, especially finance leaders and procurement leaders for this report, do a fairly good job. But since SaaS buying is decentralized, most people just don't have an idea of how to actually go about this. And the last is, what's the average amount of time taken to actually buy a SaaS tool, right? Most people take over 30 days. The average that we see for folks before they use Spendflo is about 9 days. And post using Spendflo is about 42 days on the platform right now. And we still think that's too long. And our goal is to go minimize that even more, because if people want to buy the tool that they want to go live with, let them do it as quick as they can, right? And all of this essentially leads to over $90 billion of SaaS spend actually basically being wasted year on year. And that's where the macro stands even today, right? Like this is how buyers feel in today's environment, and this is how decision makers feel in today's environment as well. So I'll pause there, and I'll let Stephen take over now. So with this 5-step plan. But Stephen, like just to kick it off, right?
Yeah.
Most people are in that state where they see the line item, they don't see what's in the line items.
That's right.
They see that it's a problem. So where do they actually get started?
Yeah, the first step is probably a pretty obvious one, but it's just take inventory. An analogy I like to use on this is, I don't know, Sid, how are you with like your browser tabs? Like, do you have a lot of them
Pretty.
open?
I have multiple. I have actually. I've gone to the stage where I have multiple windows open with multiple tabs.
Nice. That's so. All right. We're in the same boat, and I think a lot of people are in the same boat. It's a similar thing that can happen with your tech stack and your SaaS tools over time. Is like, you just keep like, let me just add another browser tab. Let me just add another tab. Let me just add another thing. And before you look up, you're like, all of a sudden I have 3 browser windows with 10 tab or 20 tabs each, and I can't even see like what each one is. And it can get overwhelming. You're like, I'm just gonna leave them. I'll just And so something very similar can happen with our SaaS spend, especially if you're at a fast growing company. You don't always have time. You're just like, I just need the next tool. I gotta move. We gotta move. We're going on to the next initiative, the next thing. And so one of the first things you can do is just hit pause and just say, let me just take inventory. And this doesn't have to be like a very cumbersome exercise. All you've got to do, this is a great example here, is just, what is the tool name? What's the cost of it, or the contract value that you're spending on it? What's the term? And then what is your renewal date, of that tool? And so imagine if you just had a list of these things laid out, all on a spreadsheet. That is like a perfect starting point. What I've done in previous companies, so where I would say I experienced this most was at a company that had raised a Series A, and they were maybe 9 months removed from raising the Series A. The flurry of, we got to get this tool, that tool, that's when we really started to feel it. So what I did is I pulled we're on, a lot of people are on QuickBooks. And so what we did was we just pulled an expense by vendor summary report and looked at it by month over the past 12 months. And that was the first place where we went to try to take inventory and fill out a spreadsheet like this.
Yeah. I actually have a quick hack for companies of all sizes and scale. The thing is, this data on, like, typically the hardest data to get is your contract value, the term, and the renewal date. Like, all of these is like hard data to get if you're decentralized buying, right? You have hundreds of people in the organization, really hard to go grab this data. So what we recommend is that if you use Google or Microsoft as your login, Microsoft and Google actually give you what tools people are actually logging into across the organization. You can actually discover all your SaaS tools from Microsoft and Google. We have a tool, we have like an app that essentially integrates with that to pull that information, but you can actually go get that information yourself. And the best way is, once you have the tool name, the best person, if you know that you've signed some agreements and you don't have access to those agreements anymore, the best person to go to for these agreements is actually the vendor. So just hit the support email of these vendors, send like a BCC all of them and say, hey, I'm your customer, I don't have your contract. Can you send me your contract? And that's the best way to centralize contracts.
That's a really good hack. Instead of chasing down a bunch of contracts all at once.
Yeah, exactly. It's a pain. It's super painful.
And I love that. That kind of goes right into step 2 here, which is, especially with that hack that you had, is you can essentially evaluate which tools are being used often by seeing what's being logged into. Now, one of the things that I actually found at my previous company was by looking at the financials and kind of seeing what was still hitting the credit card. I was able to find that there was like 5 or 10 vendors that nobody even knew was still hitting the credit card. And so, but if you take that financial data and marry it up with what you just said, you've got a perfect illustration of like who's using what tools, and you can kind of see, even it could be as simple as, when was the last login of this tool? And like that could be the data point. So I would add this data point to that spreadsheet. What was the last login of this tool? And then what you do from there is you can start to define for each tool is this a good to have, or is this a crucial, like mission critical tool? Seeing that last login date is probably going to give you most of the answer you need to determine whether it's mission critical or if it's just nice to have, or if it's even at the bottom of the pile. And so my experience has been that I even saw a lot of tools that like when a company like switches a leader. So let's say the marketing leader gets let go.
Get new tools all the time.
Yeah, it's just hitting the credit card, but like no one even knows it's still there. And then all of a sudden the new leader comes in and installs their own tech stack. And so now you've got two sets of SaaS.
Always happens. So the funny part is like, there's another hack to actually do usage and employee center. Like you said, I used to cancel credit. I still do at Spendflo. We can cancel credit cards every 3 months. That way I know, like, if somebody shouts the loudest, then I know that I've canceled something that they're using. But it doesn't scale really well as you scale. But still, like I tried doing this in my previous org, like and I've seen folks do this where like they run like a quick poll on, hey, are you actually using this tool or not? Do you actually like it or not? Right? Like, but it's really hard to go get that done, and you don't even know who the users are of this tool. So like actually building like a system, like you can do it yourself, but just getting employee sentiment on whether they like it or not honestly solves most of your problems, because then they feel like they're part of that entire decision. So it's really easy to go say, hey, now we have data on the usage, now we have data on sentiment. Really easy to make decisions as well. So actually, there's a quick question in the Q&A, which I can quick answer as well. The question is about how, if do we get a discovery tool to do it, or does Spendflo do it, or anything? There are multiple tools in the market, yes, that kind of help you discover your stack. But yes, we do help you. We have integrations with all the SSO, Google, the Microsoft, all of them of the world. We also track usage through using Chrome extension as well along the way. And we also have an app, a Slack and a Teams bot that actually gets you employee sentiment in real time, 120 days before the renewal dates. So we can actually track the users and sentiment by application within the application. So hope that helps. Stephen, you can take it away, I think, in the next step.
Yeah, I think the next step here is it seems like there's a SaaS tool that solves every problem and multiple problems. And so oftentimes there's overlap, and you might even have a feature in a tool that you don't even realize could completely get rid of another tool that you have. And so I think this is one huge area where you talked about that 90 billion that goes to waste. There's a lot of that. I think that's overlap.
I don't even think that's included in this by any chance.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay, there you go. It's
like over 90 billion. Then this is.
Yeah, and I think overlapping can have a couple definitions, at least from my experience, what I saw. One would be there's overlapping features. Two would be let's say one department is signed up for Loom or some other software. I saw this at a previous company. They had signed up for the same vendor, and then there was like 3 or 4 different separate subscriptions when it could have been combined into an enterprise subscription and saved quite a bit of money. And so that's one, and then another one is just unused licenses. So that's another kind of opportunity where you're paying for something that is just, it's essentially not used. So
the other hack I have is that the first culprit of this is project management tools. There's probably 4 of them within the organization that people are using on an average. Just go find them, right? Like, and that's the easiest, like, lowest hanging fruit to go solve this problem. But yeah, like, duplicate software spend is painful, but like, if you know, like you said, if you understand what you're spending and understand the sentiment of it, it's easier to solve for. But yeah, like, I think it's Stephen, I'll let you go.
Yeah. Number 4. So by this point, you've got a lot of good data on your organization and on your SaaS spend. And so one of the things, if you're going back to a vendor, to try to renegotiate a price down or negotiate out some unused licenses. I think there's a couple things that I've seen, and I want to use the analogy of buying a car. So I was buying a used car a few years ago, and I knew the price I wanted. I had done my research ahead of time, and I knew what the market price was, and I had 3 different options. So if I couldn't get the price I wanted for option 1, I was okay with walking away because I had option 2 and I had option 3 ready to go. And so I think what's most critical heading into this is knowing what your needs are first and foremost, and not because if you don't, then it's very easy for that vendor to kind of control the narrative and control the conversation. And then for the purposes of SaaS software, it's a little harder to find that data than it is like find used car data. But to do that, there's a lot of tools like Spendflo. I believe Spendflo, you've got benchmarking data, and this is taken from other Spendflo customers. And like you can't put a price tag on that kind of information. And then you can go and what these vendors are willing to negotiate on or not willing to negotiate on.
Yeah. And the way I used to do this before we created Spendflo to go solve this problem, I used to use like Reddit and Quora and honestly just go beg, borrow, steal from anyone I knew, but I realized it doesn't scale. And that was the thesis behind like actually saying, hey, let's just go start a company that like, because the problem with SaaS pricing is it actually changes every 6 months. The same vendor kind of evolved. Pricing is like it's like almost like airline prices now, like not as dynamic as airline prices, but like it's becoming close to it. On a yearly basis, it kind of changes. So if you don't have that database up to date, it becomes a really big problem as well.
I think the other point I kind of highlighted was on step 4 was just have an idea in mind of if there are other tools out there that could solve the problem. Because if so, and this is just a classic negotiating tactic of but XYZ can do the same thing, and I'm willing. I do this with my cable and internet bill. I'm able to get that. A little different with SaaS, but just have your options and be prepared when you come to the table with that data. You're not necessarily backed into a corner. There's often multiple tools that can solve that same problem, and that just gives you a little bit of leverage in the process.
That's true. The 5th most important point, Newland's five steps as well.
Absolutely. So this is an ongoing thing, right? As your company changes and grows, your SaaS spend is going to change and grow. And what will happen over time is what I experienced, which is subscription creep or SaaS creep. Unless you're just, and it's kind of like you got a junk drawer at your desk, right?
Yeah.
Like over time you clean it out every few months, but then all of a sudden, like you find that there's random stuff back in there, and a couple months later. And so if my suggestion here is go through this process once, and then develop a process and repeat it every 90 days, 120 days. This doesn't have to be complicated, but this can be something that, just if you do it on a recurring basis, you will avoid a lot of wasted dollars on software spend. And a platform like Spendflo can actually track that and make it so much easier to be able to manage and track that spend. I know I've experienced that firsthand. So and like just a good rule of thumb is to do this having it, like, even if you're not using a tool, like a good hack for this is like just do it quarterly, like just do like a subscription audit on a quarterly basis. It's worth it because that it is painful if you have more than 120 tools or so that you're using to do it manually, but even if you don't use a tool, right, like it's totally worth just putting in that time and effort to do it. Actually leads me to like the next step, right? Like just wanted to learn, made just a quick poll on we actually provide like a SaaS spend index on where you are for a company your size versus companies of very similar sizes. Like, so that's what the benchmark data that we have actually comes into place, where we can actually give you like a SaaS spend report on a SaaS spend index report, where
just to benchmark where how you're performing as well, and let us know if that's of interest to you. And happy to help with that as well.
Can I add a little piece here,
Yeah.
Sid? So I at a previous company, we were evaluating tools like Spendflo, and I might have been a little kind of hesitant at first at how much we could save.
Yeah.
I promise you, on the other side of it, there's a lot more savings there than you might even realize. So it's well worth exploring. So this is just my firsthand experience.
Thanks, Steven. Awesome. So just in that as well, like, just in terms of like what we do, like you mentioned, like it's essentially designed around the Newland's 5-step process, right? Like our entire platform is essentially designed for that Newland's 5-step process. So how you actually decide, hey, you want to get stock of all your stools, we actually integrate with any of your ERPs. We integrate with all your SSO functions, and also with some of your SaaS tools to track spend, usage, and sentiment of all of your tools. The thing is that we also have benchmark data and on all of those SaaS spends, and able to actually affect savings through our buying team as well. The buying team will essentially work with you to go deliver savings, negotiate with the vendors, and get you the right price, manage all your contracts for you, and you can actually go through the intake, approval, security questionnaires, all of that. And our security hub essentially automates your entire security questionnaire process, so you don't have to actually go through another system to go do that, and you don't have to go ask to follow up with the vendors every year to go get the security data updated. And that's essentially, in essence, what we really want to achieve is with all the 3 hubs in one single place to make sure that you have that one single source of truth for all your SaaS vendor data. So I'll pause here, and I just wanted to open it up to the audience for any questions. There's a quick question on, hey, do you compete with like Coupa, or are there more like partners? They're more like partners really for us. Like we're really focused on SaaS spend, and that's where our focus remains. And Coupa does a fantastic job with the other pieces of the business, which is your PR and PO and all of those processes as well. I hope that answers your question. Sorry, Steven, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention one thing too, while we're waiting on a few more questions, and that's around the idea of like a workflow and like approval, almost like an approval workflow. Because what can happen a lot is if anybody's got a credit card or if there's not great financial controls, people can just go sign up for tools, and so you can. I believe Spendflo has the ability to create a workflow approvals where you can go in there and have like certain levels of the organization approve different levels of spend. So that's another preventative way to avoid subscription creep.
Yep, exactly. And just do that pre-approval, right? Especially before people actually spend that money, just make sure that it's actually in budget. And we're actually launching our budgeting feature as well, like in the next 2 months. So we'll actually have that. I think. What's the profile of them? What stage do they implement? How much are they spending on SaaS? The quick question over here is that what's the profile? When do folks generally implement something like this, right? When does it actually make sense? So, Steven, from your experience, at what spend level did you start actually implementing something like this?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact like range in terms of like software spend itself. I would say we had like probably 2 or 3 big vendors. Like our sales team was really ramping up, so you can imagine the big sales vendors we had, marketing vendors. But what we started to see was it was like all the little things that kept like getting added on. This was, I would say, 6 months after Series A was kind of when we started to notice like we need something in place to manage this better. So that was my personal experience.
Makes sense. I hope that answers the question. I think there was another question. Typically, we end up saving between 5x to 8x our subscription fees. That's typically what we see in our customer base. And based on like the company and where they are in their journey, but like the range remains between 5 to 8x of the customer base, right? So, but Stephen, I'm just curious, right? Like when you actually start looking at this, and how big was the finance team when you actually look at something like this?
Yeah, so it was myself, and then we had a bookkeeper, and we had an accountant on board. Actually, it might have been just myself and a bookkeeper at the time.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you end up like in that journey, like can you imagine as you scale, one thing that I always ask is that especially for finance leaders, when you have, and as you scale as a business, there's multiple asks, right? From different orgs, and the asks just increase on quarter. So I'm just
Very.
curious, like at what point did you say, hey, listen, I need to hire a headcount. I need to like ramp up my team to maybe work with the vendor like Spendflo, or like help with other things as with FP&A. At what point did you actually see that, like in your journey as well, that saying, hey, I'm looking for support on FP&A, for example, right? Or
we were at about, I think, 5 to 6 million in ARR, like at that point. But we had a pretty large team. It was a people heavy business. We had like around 100 employees. Probably would have done it a little sooner than that, though.
Yeah, makes sense.
Just kind of where we were at.
Yeah, makes sense. Just two other questions from, I think, Jeff. Does your software connect into a GL or credit card to see the spend? We actually connect with the GL. We are able to connect with all the GL. Any of the, we're live with about 100 different integrations right now. So Jeff, happy to like get the right person to depending on your stack, we can even run like a quick POC to just get that as well. I think the second question, the biggest challenge to discover SaaS tools is there are more than 500 million in revenue and 1,800 employees. What is your best recommended approach? If that's the case, like at 500 million in revenue, you're probably using a bunch of you're using an SSO, a single sign-on provider, and you're probably using Microsoft or Google. Getting a tool to integrate with these applications to just discover what your SaaS tools are would be the easiest approach. Once you do that, and if you have like any financial system, just you're getting that spend export from there, can actually align both, right? You can actually, if you integrate with the SSO, you can actually see who the users are of all these SaaS tools when they've logged in as well, and you can actually then you can ask specific targeted questions on who's actually bought this tool, right? Like it's easier to do that rather than anything else. Hope that answers your question as well. Awesome. Thanks. I think any other questions we can answer for folks? Stephen, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, I had one other thought that came to mind, that another benefit that I saw when using a tool was think about like all the teams who are trying to go out there and like evaluate tools. So like you'd rather have your sales team like selling, not trying to evaluate software spend. And so that was a hidden benefit that I actually noticed, was how much time as a growing organization you're spending evaluating tools when there's a lot of like, you got market experts
actual work. Yeah.
And there's like data and market experts at Spendflo who are like, yeah, we've helped hundreds of other companies or whatever solve this problem before. We know exactly what tools are going to be best. That's a hidden time savings to keep focused on what they're good at.
That's true, actually. It's something that like we see a lot because we have market data on, hey, what's the market share of this particular SaaS tool versus their competitor? We actually have market data on what's the average price range you can be paying for the SaaS tool for X number of users. We also have data on the average spend, the average usage, and the average NPS score of these SaaS tools as well. So it helps in that decision-making approach. And our buying team essentially is split into category buyers. So they actually, we have teams dedicated to the sales and marketing category, the engineering category, so on and so forth. So they're essentially buying tools every single day, right? And that's their job. So that's like, thank you for calling that out, Stephen. That is an added benefit.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Folks don't have any other questions, Meda. I think like we'll get this to a close so that I can leave Stephen to kickstart his day. Thank you so much, Stephen, for taking the time and spending this with us. Thank you, folks, for joining. And we'll be able to follow up with any other information you have. I think, Stephen, best place to find you is on LinkedIn.
Yep, LinkedIn. Stephen Newland on LinkedIn.
Oh, perfect. Best way to find me is also on LinkedIn, and we also have my email address as well. Thank you guys so much for joining. Bye-bye.